Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Thursday, February 19th, 2026. It's 2:30 in the afternoon. And we have with us Hardy Merrill, Deputy Commissioner of Finance and Management. And we have three topics that we've asked them to come speak about: the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, vacancy savings, and then the administration's request to use 15 million of the Vermont Higher Ed Endowment Trust for a currently non-allowable use, but related to one of our universities. So hopefully that sounds familiar. Hardy, welcome.
It does. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Hardy Merrill, Deputy Commissioner, Finance and Management. I've got three documents that I've shared with the committee. I'm going to start by using as a guide for my testimony. There's a 5-page document. It's titled Budgeted Vacancy Savings at the top of page 1.
I'm sorry, could you print that out, Autumn?
It's like this.
Am I just the only one who's not finding it? Huh. This always happens to me. If there's three things, I get to it. Thank you.
So
Here we go.
So page 1 is essentially a copy and paste of an email I sent to Representative Squirrel yesterday. Yesterday, he sent me a message saying a committee chair, asked me how vacancy savings is calculated. Is it appointed? I think it's a point of time. That's what I told him. Am I right? And so I responded and said, well, I wouldn't characterize your response as, particularly accurate. And then I provided all of this text here on page 1 in response in my attempt to.
So I redivert and redirect, because it's all what you'll explain it to us.
I'm going to explain. I just thought since I'd taken the time to type this out for Representative Squirrel, I would repurpose it.
Get your mind's worth.
Repurpose it for the rest of the committee. And so what I'm essentially trying to explain in this missive is that there is not any set formulaic calculation to arrive at vacancy savings numbers. And I also wanted to convey that the budget submissions come to DFM, and DFM may challenge or may question or require departments to justify their vacancy savings, their budgeted vacancy savings amount, if it appears to be much out of line with historical actual experience. However, it's generally not, DFM dictating a certain amount, and it's definitely not DFM dictating a certain amount based on a formula, nor is it DFM requiring any certain formula or set calculation method to be used by departments. And the reason I'm kind of stepping through this, there's still some misconceptions for people who've been in the legislature for a long time, I think. Talking to some people, that I work with, like some around 15, 20 years ago, I think there were, as part of budget instructions, specific guidance is offered, like assume 5% for vacancy savings, and that would be expected to be put in. I wanted to just make it clear that that is no longer the case. There's not a specific direction provided other than the text I copied and pasted from our budget instructions, which is in the indented section with the 2 paragraphs, where we explain in instructions it should reflect the best possible estimate of savings, both for salary and benefit costs combined, resulting from positions that are not expected to be filled for part or all of FY27. And then we add in another paragraph, if vacancy savings budget submissions appear to be inconsistent with your department's historical trend of savings related to position vacancies, please be prepared to justify your assumptions during budget review. And it is a topic that we are typically discussing in our annual meetings, which last at least an hour with every appropriation across state government. That being said, there are tools that there is a point of time information that is available to departments as they embark on their budget development process each fall. And the budget system takes data out of the VTHR system from at the time we are, opening it up for people to do their budget work. And some of the information it shows is in the position summary report. It lists all positions, and you're familiar with this report because it's received as part of your package. And it lists all the positions, and it lists the salary and benefit costs associated with that position. Now, what we don't provide as part of the governor's recommend are the actual names of people in positions. That's not a piece of detail that's required in the form of the governor's budget report. However, departments, when they're doing their budget, do have this report. And so they can clearly see whether positions have a name or not. And if they don't, it essentially says unfilled, and it's still got an amount there, but they can see all their currently vacant positions, whether they are a department of 5 positions or 200. So it is something that is viewed by everyone as a point in time, and it's available in the budget system. And that is one of the things, for instance, a DFM analyst will look at to compare to what the request is for budgeted vacancy savings. There are other tools that we'll use as well, including looking at for salary costs, look back in history to see, okay, here's the budgeted salary expense, but here's the actual. And if you look at that for a few years and it's always running under, that may prompt you to also look at VTHR historical data, look at actual numbers at various times of the year of vacant positions and perform this analysis. And it's a back and forth with the department. But I think some of the questions and discussion, if I saw from notes from committee, are, what's the process, and is DFM dictating? And so,
because I've heard from, I know that we have heard from at least 2 organizations that have to put their budgets through you, that they felt, I don't know, force may not be the right word, but in order to make their budget hit your 3% mark, which we know not every agency does, they were told they actually were going to have to let people go because of vacancy savings. They were fully staffed, or they were whatever, and they were told, they use vacancy savings to make it balance, and that would require letting people go. And I'm not going to name names.
okay,
I can think of 2.
state's attorneys and sheriffs, one of them that we could talk
I'm
about.
not going to name names.
Okay, maybe I'll address them in my remarks.
Okay.
I want to first make clear, and I can do this in no uncertain terms, has it ever been conveyed by DFM to any of the departments, at least I'm speaking for the last 5 years when I've been present personally in every budget meeting. It has never been conveyed that you cannot fill, you'll be required to leave positions open, and you can't recruit and you can't hire because of a vacancy savings number. That's never.
Then you have to let people go to make a vacancy savings number.
What's that?
That's still different than you have to let people go in order to make a vacancy.
That hasn't been conveyed either.
Okay.
I can tell you what we have conveyed. And I
That's,
can tell you what we actually did, for instance, with the Human Rights Commission last year, was if they were not achieving the vacancy save, and this is, of course, a very small department.
yeah.
It's a small amount, but with a staff of only 5, that's material. So as we're getting through the year and they're concerned about running out of funds, we simply provided them the money through the Pay Act request process. So we've got a $25 million appropriation to the Secretary of Administration for distribution for payroll purposes. And so that's one lever that can be pulled. In some cases, there are other levers that can be pulled. For instance, if it's an internal service fund department, an excess receipts request could be used. That would be legitimate because you could anticipate that, yes, this is necessary. We need to keep paying these people. If we run into deficit in the fund, we'll need to increase our charges to departments next year. But that would be a legitimate use of an excess receipt. there are various methods. And I also want to call out, I think there's in particular, which has been a bit disappointing to me, some misunderstanding in our communications for some years now with state's attorneys and sheriffs, where I have personally made the comment, which I remember vividly, explaining we are not asking you to hold open any prosecutor positions. In fact, it's very much in line with the governor's strategic priorities that we have all the prosecutors we can hire. And if you find that you do not have adequate spending authority and you're able to hire, that is a wonderful problem to have that we can help solve. And I'm sure we could probably, through the Pay Act process, provide the spending authority to get you through the year. And then now that we're in a different position in terms of vacancies, we can budget for the next year at a level that funds all these necessary, positions.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely the case. And I'll say I provided this a 5-page worksheet that I really don't want to go too into the weeds on going through. But if we look on page 2 of this, what you'll see is that under state's attorneys, for example, they have at the time a few months ago when we opened up the budget system, they had 9 vacancies. And the first highlighted column, which is like the dollar value of vacancy positions, that's like $1.18 million if those vacancies remain. They're but the budgeted vacancy savings, which I know I did hear in their testimony, they're asking to have that bought back. They don't want to have any budgeted vacancy savings, but $330,000 compared to their actual vacancies and what they've seen for some years now, in terms of, unfortunately, it's very hard to hire certain positions. We think that is a realistic number, and in fact, far more will achieve. I'll say on state's attorneys, for example, they had a large amount of carry forward left at the end of fiscal year 25, close to $700,000. So if the vacancy savings, the budgeted vacancy savings is eliminated, I think the expected outcome is probably going to be another large amount of unspent carry forward at the end of the year. And that's fine. That can be addressed, if necessary. But our goal is to, we are trying to shoot for accurate budgets and amounts for budgeted vacancy savings. And the reason is really, if you go to the last page of the 5-page worksheet and you look at the bottom line, you're going to see some really big numbers. So the budgeted vacancy savings that's in the governor's recommended budget is $81 million. So if we didn't have any budgeted vacancy savings, right, we would have to come up with $81 million. But the other thing I note is, again, this is just a point of time, but at the point in time of kicking off the budget development cycle here, and when we imported all the information in the budget system, the actual value of the vacant positions is $104 million. So we're certainly not exceeding on a statewide basis the amount of actual vacancies at this time. It's somewhat more conservative, at least on a statewide basis. And if you go through each appropriation in 5 pages, some are up and some are down, and there's stories behind each of them that I probably, don't have time to go into. I could talk briefly about some of the largest ones. I mean, you'll see
correctional service.
You'll see in DOC, their budgeted vacancy savings is $1 million greater than what's shown in the pension summary. A big part of that, Madam Chair, is due to the fact that they're not only paid straight salary, and this only shows the straight salary. There are the shift differentials and all those other things that pile on. So in fact, if you have a vacancy in corrections, you're saving not only the base salary, there are other amounts that I think you may be aware of from recent recent collective bargaining agreements. So I do think their budgeted vacancy savings is not necessarily really out of line compared to their current vacancies because there's additional
turnover. You're going to have more vacancy savings, even based on the number of positions. When I used to manage 500 people and I had to deal with this myself in my budgets at the bank. And if you have turnover, the same position turns over 3 times, it's still one, you've got it budgeted for 1 position, but it could be three times.
That's true also.
That will increase.
Another really big one is state police. And now you'll see state police is significantly, they budgeted significantly less vacancy savings than their current amount of vacancies this fall. However, I think you may have heard from Commissioner Morrison's testimony, there's some optimism. They're actually filling the academy with more recruits. So we actually do expect in that operation, we're hopeful that in fact, in the future, the vacancies will be less than what they are at this current point of time. And so the FY27 budget is optimistically reflecting that we will need to spend more on wages than the current amount of vacancies in that outlet. I didn't want to get too far in the weeds, but I wanted to share, I thought it was a good answer to, Representative Squirrel's question. There is sort of a point in time snapshot. It doesn't always tell the whole story, but it's interesting, I think, to compare on the bottom line, the total value of vacancies in the state right now, and compare that to what we're budgeting in the budget and the governor's recommend for 27. And keep in mind, this is all funds. This is all funds.
You have the governor's office in here too? Executive office, there it is on page 1. I remember the.
Yes.
That.
So it's actually very close to,
right.
In that case, it's very close to the current vacancies. And I think I may have explained the positions that are vacant now, we simply are planning to keep them vacant. So that's very close to 1-to-1 right there.
The ADS is not. I'm looking at the top further up. They both are budgeted more vacancy savings than by, it's like almost 3 million.
I did notice that that significant delta as well when I printed this out before I came over. And I can't off the top of my head
you got all these
delve into that one. Well, and a lot of the reason is we really focus on general fund in our analysis.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of it's sort of up to the department whether they, they kind of manage their own fund. ADS, although there is a general fund component in the GovRec this year, there's still primarily an internal service fund. And frankly, that had not caught my eye before. So I have a bit of a question mark myself on that one. But
yeah, I'm sure Marty will be asking you about it. Yeah, Wayne. Okay.
So if we just go back and take a look at your state's attorney's example again. So essentially what you're telling us is that if you have the proper number of vacancy savings and something happened that they didn't have enough money, there's going to be an opportunity for them to rectify using.
there would be an opportunity for them to make a pay act request as they do every year,
Right.
and they could ask for an enlarged amount. And I'm quite confident that we would be able to accommodate that. I can, not to go too far on a tangent, to talk about pay act, which is, that could be an hour-long topic in itself. But I'll speak just very briefly to why I'm confident there's capacity to make up for certain special situations like this in when a department needs maybe more than just the collective bargaining agreement percentage, and why I feel we can accommodate that. And that is, especially during the past couple years, we've, in finance and management, taken a pretty strong initiative with the carry forward review request. You say, okay, to departments that have leftover carry forward at the end of the year, we'll say, okay, we'll let you keep this, but we're also calculating your pay act. If they're saying, let's say $500,000, and we want to keep this carry forward, we'll take a look and we'll say, well, we're calculating, our analyst calculates that your pay act need is going to be $250,000 next year. So we'll let you keep maybe $500,000 if you have a good use, you can justify for the other 250. But for 250 of that, we're carving it off. And even though it remains in their appropriation, they can't spend it until we release it at pay act time. So what I'm saying is we're sort of self-funding to the tune of, I don't know, several million dollars. We're sort of self-funding pay act needs through carry forward, which means the pay act appropriation, which is just based on assuming, all the collective bargaining wage pressure, and it's not assuming anyone's self-funding their general fund pay act. That gives us the flexibility to be able to accommodate special situations like the ones we're talking about. If a Human Rights Commission or a state's attorneys requires extra funding because of because of not meeting what was budgeted for vacancies. I hope I didn't lose anyone on that train of thought.
Well-
Just to be clear now, so say they got carry forward.
Yes.
They needed the extra $300,000 or something. You're saying, okay, we're gonna carve out this $300,000. We're not gonna let you have it now.
That's right. Until
Time of pay act, then
spring. Yep. Like
we will then release that habit. But if they didn't have any carry forward, they might be able to then go to pay act and you might be able to provide them funds out of it.
every general. Yes. And so in terms of general fund, every general fund department does typically make a pay act request. Unless they've got really severe vacancies. There was actually a remarkable few years ago, state police, which is a huge general fund department, they actually didn't have a pay act request for the unfortunate reason that their vacancies exceeded their increases due to collective bargaining. But that was an anomaly. Usually people do have pay act requests. And I'm explaining that we create extra capacity in our ability to quote unquote dole out pay act from the secretary's $25 million pot by making certain departments, if they have the resources, sort of self-fund their pay act.
You're not just giving them a blank check to be able to use carry forward. They have to check in and get authorization.
That's correct. In other cases, though, Representative LaRoche, they may have $500,000 available, but we will not carve it out and make them use it for pay act. And we'll give them the entire $500,000 for a different purpose, depending on what their needs are. They've got an IT project that has got cost overruns and has to be complete. They come up with some justification. Then maybe so it's not always, we don't always carve out anything for pay act out of what they have. But if possible, if it appears that there's capacity there, yes, we make that effort, and it adds up to statewide over the general fund several millions of dollars.
At the beginning of the fiscal year, you may have decided through their budgeting process that they can just use the money as they need it in terms of carry forward. But in some cases, you're going to say, okay, you may
That's correct.
reserve it. You have to come to us.
And when we reserve it for pay act, that's what creates capacity. And it's actually a real good thing we did this. Was it last year or the year before? I mean, we had to send corrections. I mentioned already, they've got some special compensation arrangements that were negotiated that were not foreseen in the budget. We had to send corrections $10 million, right? In order to keep the thing afloat because of some of the things I mentioned in terms of increases. Fortunately, we had the capacity. The pay act appropriation was not calculated to accommodate that kind of payment, but because we had done some of this, proactive reservation of carry forward, that helped create the capacity to sort of dodge a bullet, if you will, on that one with corrections. So I'm sorry, I got a little off topic, but what I wanted to share is there are various levers we can pull to ensure that despite vacancy savings may perhaps not being achieved, and a department may not be able to fund the positions they have, we have levers we can pull to make that happen and get through the fiscal year.
So I'm wondering though, since you brought it up on page 3, Human Rights Commission, the Human Services Board, a bunch of ag things. There's a lot that have no money for vacant positions because they're fully staffed, and yet they have budgeted vacancy savings. So why wouldn't it just be zero? There's
Well,
a whole bunch of them on that page.
to be honest, we would have, you know, I don't have at my hands, transcripts from each of these meetings. With each of these,
I'm just wondering, because
each
there's a
of
whole
these-
bunch here, it's not like there's one, and I'm just wondering how that would happen if they're fully staffed, that they would then have vacancy savings.
well, they could be, this is how, I mean, they're submitting a budget, they need to meet a target.
Yeah.
And they choose the way to put together their budget to meet the target. If they are choosing to book vacancy savings as opposed to making an actual cut to something else, that's something they can put forward. And in these cases, these budgets were accepted and they have been part of
Yeah,
the governor's delivered budgets.
right.
If they are in a position where they do not, they may need to make they need to meet as a business, they may need to make a business decision next year. I can't tell whether, you know, again, this is all funds. So I'm not sure on the funds, and in particular in ag. That's a lot of special fund there. They may, for instance, in ag, they've got some special funds that have, we have in the past executed ERRs when they've had additional fund balances, and they move things around between a lot of different, they've got numerous different special funds. They move things around quite a bit. I can't
Okay.
do a budget presentation on each of these.
I'm not asking you, I just didn't know if there was any sort of theme that you could bring up, but Dave, you look at your question.
I just wanted, did you say the total value of the vacancy savings was 81?
Yeah, what's in the budget is on the last page of this 5-page worksheet. So what's actually put forth and in the budget for budgeted vacancy savings across all funds is $81.5 million.
So I must not be following this right. So if the average position's worth 100,000, I don't know if that's accurate, because you divide that into 81 million, it's a lot of positions that have to be vacant all year long.
So the number of actual vacant positions as of
862.
as of the point of time of a couple months ago is 862. And that actually equates to $104 million of salary and benefits value. So we're budgeting for something less than that.
So we need to have 700 plus positions unfilled at all times in order to come into the budget. Correct? Am I right?
We actually,
Partial year.
we don't want to have the positions unfilled.
Well, how do you get the standards on?
Say you hire somebody in the middle of fiscal year.
Yeah.
So yeah, half the fiscal year, they're not there.
Right,
You got a position, but you get vacancy savings for half that.
sure. Get that.
So a bunch of that must be intermixed with other things in those numbers. So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
There is some amount of turnover, but the state has also had a fairly large number of vacant positions over the course of the last.
There always are right at churning.
It's churning, but then, I mean, when we were looking at openings and joint fiscal net, where we were hearing the transportation agency's decision, at the time, there were either 799 or 899 open positions then. So this 842 is tracking that, but it's still a lot of open positions where things aren't able to get done because we don't have those people. Right? Yeah. And we need to move on.
I know, I'm so sorry.
I'm realizing we can also, we should have had to come for longer, but.
It's really like, just the budget hinges on it. I mean, it seems that the budget, we can't make the budget unless we keep a big chunk of state positions vacant.
Well, the
I mean,
We'll see if perhaps job market dynamics will change. But, currently, these positions, most if not all, are, actively being recruited. So, and they're,
but we don't have the money for them. I mean, as you pointed out, we would still have.
right. So the hard part is, I guess, we don't know which ones are necessarily going to remain unfilled, which ones will get someone to move in and which ones won't. So we don't feel it's prudent, for instance. We do think, for instance, there should be more state troopers. So even though there have been a large number of vacant positions, we don't see a benefit in abolishing those positions so that they can't be filled sometime in the future.
There's always going to be open positions. We know that. This is almost 10% of the workforce. Not quite. 9%.
Yeah, and so it's
a lot.
it's the number here, on the report is 8.7 in terms of the total positions in the budget, loaded in the budget system. And then the number of vacancies. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a lot. A lot. Okay, I'm going to move us on.
Okay.
We'll get you back maybe in April. We'll have a much longer discussion about this, but I want to, some of us have another meeting together. So we want to finish up with, we have ERAP and then the 15 million. So.
Okay. So the ERAP, I provided a little bit of background history here. I'm assuming the committee may be familiar with the really large amounts of pandemic relief dollars that came to the state via ERAP 1 and ERAP 2. It was over $350 million. A large portion of that, on the order of $200 million plus, I think, was flowed through the Vermont State Housing Authority. They administered the VRAP program, Vermont Emergency Rental Assistance Program,
Right.
that essentially for eligible applicants, covered rent payments to their landlords. The second tranche of the ERAP funds, the period of performance recently closed September 30th, 2025. It's in the closeout process now. What has been determined is that there is about $6.9 million of the ERAP 2 funds that were administered by Vermont State Housing Authority that were spent in ways that are disallowed by the federal program rules. I can't speak to specifically what those circumstances were, and that would involve, perhaps the Vermont State Housing Authority if you needed to get into the weeds. Where we come in finance and management is not wanting to have to remit $6.9 million back to the federal government based on disallowed uses. So that's why first in 2024 Act 113, Section C110, there was language put in that you'll see down at the bottom of page 2 here to provide for this reversion and reallocation, essentially swaps of ERAP for general fund. And I'll try to explain a little bit better the mechanics of how that's working. But the key here is, and the reason there's language that was just submitted to update the language, is that it referred to only using general fund for this swap process. It did not mention any other fund, and we have a need to perform one of these swaps with some, I know it's a long name, the other infrastructure, essential investments and reserves subaccount in the cash fund for capital and essential investments. So that's a transaction in the amount of $1.192 million that we're not legally authorized to complete until we enact some language that authorizes us to perform such an action on that fund. So basically, and if you want to see, the detail, again, not sure how far in the weeds we want to go, but I provided a copy of the actual memo from the Secretary of Administration, who is authorized pursuant to this language to propose adding spending authority in ERAP 2 and also in general fund on the back of the page related to these specific appropriations. And so to walk through essentially, this can be hard to get one's head around, but going back to, the VSHA expends some funds in ways that are disallowed by the federal program rules. So now what we're doing is after the fact, and even though it's in subsequent fiscal years, there are ways to create financial accounting transactions to essentially use the ERAP for allowable purposes. And that's why you see so many DCF emergency housing appropriations referenced here. There were state funds, in most cases general fund, but in one case from this other cash fund, subaccount B, there are cases in which state funds were spent on purposes that would be allowable by the ERAP federal program rules. So we're after the fact performing a substitution of now putting the ERAP spending authority to these various DCF appropriations and then we're simultaneously freeing up general fund then that can then be, and it's kind of, it goes in a big circle. Then the general fund can be sent to VSHA, and then it goes in a circle. I can't remember which is first. It's sort of a chicken or the egg, but they provide the ERAP funds that were disallowed. They send those back to the state so that they can be used for allowable purposes, and we send general fund back to VSHA, and it's going like that. And that's all fine, and it takes place in the back of the back in the back room based on this reversion and reallocation language that was authorized. The only problem is there's one appropriation cited in this memo from the secretary. If you look on the second page, it's actually not Fund 1000, which is general fund. It's Fund 21953 for $1.192 million. And when this memo reaches our desk at the Commissioner of Finance and Management, we say, hey, there's actually a problem. The language doesn't authorize us to do it with this fund number. So basically, what I've communicated to the AOA Financial Services Division is that we can't complete this transaction until language is enacted. So we've got a chance that we may run for a temporary time a $1.192 million deficit in the ERAP fund. But once this language is enacted, we will send the money to VSHA and they'll send the ERAP back, and that will alleviate the fund deficit and all the better. So I realize this is one of the most challenging to perhaps understand and most boring topics out there.
Well, not to us, but so I want to know why the numbers don't balance, because you
Yes.
created appropriations of 6.9, but you're
Yes.
spending 10 million, and the age secretary seems to have 6.7 million.
Yes, you know what? If you really wanted a thorough walkthrough, I have seen some of the spreadsheets and correspondence. The Chief Recovery Office has actually taken the lead on this whole putting together these transactions to be executed by finance and management. Because of the fact that it's spanning multiple fiscal years, it becomes very complicated to track. And I think you would probably need maybe 15 to 20 minutes, but perhaps a half hour. If you're having the recovery office on any other topic, you may want to plan for an in-depth explanation that even if I could provide it, I don't think I could provide it in this time allotted and still address the higher education trust fund.
Okay. Yeah, all right. We'll do some digging and figuring out what we need to know, and then we'll,
The digging I did, and just to finish, the reason there ended up being an emergency housing related appropriation from the cash fund was 2023 Act 81, Section 7, which was a complicated maneuver that swept an unallocated balance from the cash fund subaccount, which was based on end of year revenues above forecast. And it was enacted in June, and it was sort of a budget compromise bill. It was a separate standalone bill, and it put 25 million towards emergency housing through April 1 of 2024. And that was expended on that purpose. And now what we're doing is trying to go back and swap some ERAP dollars in there for some of those dollars that were spent that would comport with the eligibility rules of the ERAP program. Again, this is all about just not returning any millions to the federal government and finding ways to deploy it in allowable ways. So,
let's go to the 15 million. Thank
Okay.
you, Marty.
sure. I understand by looking at your agenda, I think you had the treasurer's office visit with you yesterday.
Yes.
Did they provide, so some of what I'm doing is explaining here in this handout, the way the higher education trust fund is funded, the mechanisms, how it's dispersed. Did they go through all that already?
Yeah, I've got all that. Yep.
Okay, so I'll assume then I don't need to walk through really the first section here.
I don't have that.
I'm on page,
It's on the same one as.
I'm on page, yeah. So I
Vacancy savings has this on it?
yes, if you
Oh,
go to page 3, yes. So there's on page 1 vacancy savings. I've got the ERAP background.
Yeah.
I try to explain on page 2. And on page 3, I've got the higher education trust fund. So
Yeah.
the first section, I think we can,
We know how it works.
yep,
And what we want to understand is what you want to use the money for and why. Make the case for us.
very good. So the multi-purpose center project approved by the Board of Trustees in 2019, a project that was then commenced in 2020, has seen over 70 million. I think it's about 76 million actually spent so far. So besides the design, there was groundbreaking, there's concrete poured at this time, and some tens of millions of dollars of steel that are in storage right now, staged. In the previous UVM administration, the president decided that this was really not a priority that he wanted to pursue. There's a new administration at UVM now, and it is a priority. It looks like it would require about another $100 million to complete the project.
And this is a gym or something? A multi-purpose center project. What is that?
I actually, you know what? And so foolish me, I came here more prepared to explain about the mechanisms of the trust fund, which you've already learned about, and how we would move the money around. It is, so my basic understanding is, yes, it's a sports facility. It's a sports related facility, and also that would also provide sort of health, wellness, and recreational facilities for the student body as well. Because I did see that some of the funds that have been expended already are related to equipment for, kind of wellness equipment was one of the descriptions there. So the basic facts are, 76 million spent today. A stalled project. There have been commitments for donations in the amount of about $40 million that have been made. About $100 million is required. UVM is looking for or some support from the state really for the purpose of securing additional private donations and really bringing them to the finish line and showing investors that there is, skin in the game on the part of the state as well as of private donors. I think since 2020, an explosion in construction costs that we're all familiar with is really what's caused a lot of the need now. And from the standpoint of UVM, and perhaps they would be the best ones to make the case. I know they really made the case to the governor's office and the policy team, more so than with interacting with finance and management, but to really keep the ball rolling on this project and keep basically donor confidence, alive in terms of, yeah, we can actually, if you donate money, we can actually get something done.
So when you all made this decision, did you talk to the, UVM, I imagine you talked to because they want it, the Vermont State Colleges and VSAC about how they felt about it, because they're the ones who are recipients of this? Do you know, maybe you're not the one I need to talk to?
I know that finance and management has not talked to those entities. I'm not sure what other communications may have taken place with the governor's policy team. One of the numbers related financial points that I did want to make is if the $15 million, first I wanted to, this is actually from the treasurer's report.
You get that.
When you see
Yeah.
this chart, it really,
Yeah.
jumps off the page in terms of this 1 year,
Right.
26
Estate tax that really.
26 million pop unexpected from the estate tax. And so if we were to knock this down by 15 million, right? The amount of unexpected windfall into the higher ed trust fund would still be at the level of the previous higher ever inflow of about $11 million, right? Back in 2011. So I guess there would still be a fairly remarkable increase to the fund balance of the higher ed trust fund. And the three recipients would still receive greater than ever by a significant margin. And it's kind of hard to calculate. I tried to do on the napkin
They would get it.
with all the 12-quarter rolling averages of fund balances and everything like that. But my rough napkin math was telling me, gee, based on kind of steady and we assume even lower investment performance than last year, they could still be seeing like 25-30% increases to their disbursements after the 15 million out of the fund. So I think the thought process here is something of a rising tide for all ships.
But we don't know if anybody's talked to. So Lynn, did somebody else, do you have a question too, Tom?
I can't ask the question. I'm a little bit angry just
Okay.
listening to
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
Next slide.
So Lynn, then Wayne.
We went through quite a bit of time yesterday with the representative from the treasurer's office. And we went through the history of it. We went through how the thing is structured. And from what we understand, you're only allowed to use 5% of the allowable income that it has received.
5% of the fund balance, but it can't exceed the
no.
amount of investment income.
Yes, they have roughly $65 million in there. I assume that includes this extra money. The point is that there's supposed to be a 5%, and you can't touch the corpus. And there's certain places that money can come from to take that 5%, which doesn't look like it's going to be $15 million to any one institution. Then you have a 2% that you can use to add to an existing endowment that you already have at the institutions. And there are examples that he showed us of schools, the schools that had taken the 2%. Some year they didn't take any, but.
Right. The
So
2% is.
the question I have is if you're taking 15 million this donation would also count toward the corpus of this donated money. This wouldn't be, you're taking a bigger chunk than most schools would be able, the three institutions could take out under regular circumstances.
right.
So you're
Yes.
you're sort of invading the corpus to take out the 15 million for UVM.
Yes, or another way of looking at it, I guess, as I tried to explain, is that this magnitude is so great that instead of 26 million to the higher ed trust fund, let's put 15 to another higher ed related purpose, and it will be the balance of 11, which will still be, compared to history, an enormous infusion of cash to the, but yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, in the current payment, right, based on the formula is something like $600,000.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I'm thinking, again, this is my napkin math, trying to do, to perform roughly some complicated calculations, but I was looking at something like, okay, if the three institutions are receiving a level of 600 now, that if this recommended plan were executed, including the appropriation and expenditure of 15 million, based on the remaining fund balance and formulaic actions, it would still be, the disbursements would still be increasing to something like 800, right? To the three institutions. So
Yeah, I think.
So there would
historically
still-
It hasn't been that high, but the point.
no, it
is-
hasn't. And now there are going to be larger amounts because of, again, the chart and the fund balance, which is almost doubled. It was 36 million at the beginning of FY 25, and it closed at 66 million. So it's changed dramatically. And so essentially on the Y, I mean, the UVM was making a general fund ask, really, right? Of $20 million, and that did not fit, right? That did not fit in to the governor's priorities for the expenditure of general fund. However, looking at this anomalous event involving a huge, windfall into the higher ed trust fund, it looked like there might be a nexus and a use of funds here that could be recommended, as opposed to essentially having
No,
the,
answer of no to UVM.
I'm sorry?
But you have access to something that's a pot of money. Rather than saying, no, it can't come from general fund, it's gonna get it out of this.
That's right. And actually, we don't have access to it. There's a recommendation being made to the legislature to, to not withstand statute and to make a one-time appropriation of 15 million for this purpose.
Okay, one follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
The way this is structured, because the question is this one-time money or is this an endowment? And the way the structure is set up, it's clearly an endowment. It's not structured as the way this fund is set up by the donors, the way it's been
That's right.
done in statute. It's not a one-time money. You're trying to take one-time money.
That's why it's notwithstanding. Yeah, that's why there's the
So
notwithstanding.
you are putting language in to change the purposes of the higher ed trust.
Well, no, it's just simply notwithstanding.
Well,
We'll see
okay, so I have Wayne and then I have Tom.
when it says notwithstanding 16 VSAA section 2885, that language is required because yes, this would not be an allowable purpose of the fund otherwise. So just like there's notwithstanding language often in the ed fund to use it for a certain different purpose or in other funds. Yeah.
Wayne and then Tom.
Well, I really think UVM should make the case to us.
Yeah.
As to why they wanted it. Secondly, I think it's gonna be a hard sell. I mean, whether right or wrong, a lot of people are gonna feel that this money deserves to go to lessen the costs, the burden on students, so that we get more people educated, right? And building a field house or whatever this is tangential to to actually getting an education. On the other hand, I commented the other day that the way this looks, with the small amounts being taken out of it, I don't think it should, my personal feelings, I don't think we should build things that are gonna be for the unborn children. Meaning that every time somebody's born, then they're born, and it's for the unborn children, and you never end up using it for anything productive. So I believe that money should be used for something productive.
So
So I'm thinking, well, maybe if they came and gave us a good case, might suggest that they might get a loan out of this fund. And that loan might help them with their fundraising, and it would eventually come back to
Yeah.
the fund and still technically be used for the education that we're.
Right.
Because we're gonna have.
This affects the workforce because of the money that we're using for things. I think we have a lot of strong feelings about this.
Sure.
I'm gonna let Tom speak, and then it sounds like we might need to get UVM in. We're gonna keep pursuing this, but I think in a moment, it's just not gonna be Hardy is the best person for us to be talking to.
on the, not on the sales, not on the sales effort, and I'll acknowledge
Just
I'm
explaining.
not a salesman, but again, back to the financial aspects though. If not used for this purpose, the 15 million would go into the trust fund, but all it could do would be to sit there. And only the interest can then be used. So you're getting an enormous amount of principal that can't really be used for anything.
Which is a much larger conversation
So-
about what you do when a trust fund suddenly gets $65 million.
So that's-
Rather than just saying, let's take it and spend it here, without the bigger conversation of how do we want to use it with it now that it's different than it used to be. So I'm going to let Tom ask his question, and then we're going to go to this construction aid thing, which I see on here too.
Yeah, I haven't heard chicken and the egg thing. I'm not hearing like, what came first? The request for the $15 million from UVM, like, we really need this to do this sports complex, as opposed to education for future children, which is what the trust fund was built for and what the excess money was meant for. So you're proposing, or the administration is proposing, a miniature version of what you just explained with ERAP money, of like, I need to change the rules in order to make this happen. And yet we have a surplus of money that we're all going to fight for over the next month that the administration wants to put towards one purpose, which we'll discuss in detail as the days go on. But what came first in this decision-making process to change the rules of an existing trust fund that's been here for a long time? It's not just sitting there, it's doing a lot of work, and that's what trust funds are supposed to do. So I'm just curious at who or what, when, where decided, wow, that really grew. Let's use it for a capital project that we won't see anything, or not, it's just, I won't see it. I won't see any benefit from spending that money because I will unlikely go to any event at that sporting arena in the near future. So what came first? The idea that UVM needed money and the administration didn't want to contemplate using some of the surplus funds. And so that you saw that this big bump happened. And if we took a little bit of that, then it still looks like a great increase.
Sure. Well, I mean,
clearly I'm upset with the idea of what we're proposing here. So I just want to throw that out there. I'll accept that. I'm coming across a little strong because I don't like this.
sure. So my understanding is a request was made by UVM, just as many, just as all departments and agencies and many organizations outside of the state make requests. The request for state funds could not be accommodated in the governor's budget priorities for the general fund. This was eventually settled upon as a possibility to propose that was amenable to the governor's priorities.
Okay.
So it didn't come from, I guess, I think UVM is just making a request for funding for support for this project. I don't believe they came up with the idea of the higher ed trust fund, for instance. Was that your question?
Well, kind of, yeah. I mean, somebody had to say $15 million, we're not going to spend it out of our surplus in the general fund money because that's not a priority I know what the priority is for that money.
Right.
From the administration's perspective, whether I agree with it or not, I know what it is.
Right.
But somebody decided to propose this, and I would like
Where
to
that
get,
came
I would
from.
like to get that answer rather than it just being this amorphous, well, it's just there. And so that's the goal of our next month is to talk about like, I have no idea what the motivation was except well, what's in the memo is UVM thinks that if the state contributes more money to UVM for this one particular side project, that it might increase, that it won't disappoint the people who have already given. I think that's the gist of the language in here. And I just think that's
Well, fair point. And I'm not the best person, unfortunately, to engage with you on, in terms of the policy initiatives. And I'm sorry, I came more prepared to explain the mechanics and how this would work
The punch on that, the treasurer's office did that.
in terms of the funding and some of the history and some of the financial aspects that we could see, which would, that there would still, for the beneficiaries, there would still be an increase that would be significant
So we.
in their payments. So those are some basic
But
facts
I
in terms.
also haven't heard whether anybody's actually talked to the state, Vermont State University or VSAC about this from the administration. And maybe you aren't the one to answer that question for me. But if you're not, who should I ask if they've talked to those?
I will respond to you.
Okay,
Because I'm not sure whom in the governor's office actually has the
Okay.
lead on this particular item, since some responsibilities have changed. So
yeah,
I'll simply respond to you today, Madam Chair,
that would be
with
great.
who to talk to.
I believe they have not been asked, but I don't want to make that assumption. I'd like you to tell me before I launch off.
Yeah, please let me give you the right
That would be
contact.
terrific.
And I'll ask them to in fact contact you if that works.
And I see you have something about school construction aid. We're going to take a look at it and maybe we'll get you back, but a couple of us have to go to another meeting and I think you might too. I'm not sure. So.
I'll give you the 20-second summary if you like.
The higher ed trust fund.
Well, it's actually proposing. So I wasn't sure what you wanted to hear exactly regarding the higher ed trust fund, but there are two pieces of language that have a nexus with the higher ed trust fund. The first is the one-time appropriation we just discussed.
Yep.
And then the other is there's language in the governor's recommend that proposes to stop directing surpluses from the estate tax above 125% of consensus forecast into the higher ed trust fund, and to instead direct any such anomalous sporadic surpluses into the school construction aid fund, which is just been created in Act 73 and takes effect July 1.
So it basically freezes the higher ed endowment trust fund where it is.
Other than
A little teeny bit from unclaimed property.
the unclaimed property and investment earnings on a large fund balance.
Right.
As you can see, there are many years when they're,
And then there's years, but so, yeah, so it's a second use of the higher ed. That's right.
It's a
In a
policy.
different way.
It's a policy.
It's a policy, it is a big policy.
that is.
Policy change.
Yep.
We'll find out. House Education should be looking at this as well, and we'll find out who else. Anyway, thank you.
I
Lynn,
have a question. The treasurer's office has its own idea of how to use the unclaimed property, and it wants to raise the amount that it would use. Anything below that would go to, and they almost double the amount of money they put in to this higher education trust fund. Well, they use it for Vermont Saves, yes.
Okay,
It's a graduated 5-year thing, and they're gonna put it into Vermont Saves, and then by then, after the 5 years, it will show that much more money for.
was this part of the treasurer's presentation
Yes.
yesterday? I have to admit, I'm not aware of that, so I
It
will.
almost sounds like it's a competing
Mhm.
option. They use the $150 as well, but I think we ought to
I'll have to get up to speed on that proposal.
try to fund, kind of
Appreciate that.
kickstart Vermont Saves.
That sounds like what's in H 567, which is
could be,
on the notice calendar. Is that going to come to us?
yes.
because it lays out. a lot of
Thank you.
Okay.
You may not have gotten what you expected when you came, but we appreciate you coming very much, and answering our questions.
Well, I appreciate your time and thanks for
I'm sure
hearing out.
we'll be in
I
touch
hope it
if
was,
you have other questions.
I hope it was some help. We'll get you the
Yeah.
contact on the UVM initiative.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you so much, Harvey.
Look at 'em, yeah.
Thank you.
So committee, we are not done for the day because we have a public hearing at 5, so you have a break. Tomorrow, at the moment, we don't have committee time, but I think we will. We may be going over, we'll probably spend a little bit of time debriefing what we've heard at the last 2 public hearings. I wanted to talk to James about getting even a rough spreadsheet, not for posting, but for us to look at tomorrow as part of our thinking about what we're hearing so far for the FY 27 budget. The committee of conference met today. We just have, we have a couple of language things, and then one other thing we're gonna deal with. We're gonna meet at 8:30 tomorrow morning, from 8:30 to 9, and then at 10:30 or 10:45, and we'll wrap it up tomorrow. So.
committee at 9.
So, I don't know yet what we're gonna do. Keep an eye out. We'll send a text. I just don't know yet. I have to go to another meeting.
Okay.
So, Lynn,
If you come up with something in the conference committee by, say, by noon, are you going to be asking us to stay to vote on it, or we wait till Monday?
I don't think you vote on the committee of conference.
Or
It's,
through it, or whatever.
the committee doesn't vote. No, the committee of conference will vote, and then it would just go to the floor for next week.
So we don't have to worry about.
You don't have, there's gonna be no voting committee. My goal is that we're done. There's a storm coming and we can, yeah, let's see.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.